Good evening, everyone. This is part 3 of the chapter Life Processes, and we are going to do a two-part series, a brief two-part series about different modes of nutrition. We have already covered autotrophic nutrition in the previous class. Today, we are going to discuss about heterotrophic nutrition. So, nutrition is all about procuring food, the carbon-rich source of energy, whether certain organisms can synthesize and create their own food. They are the autotrophs. Majority of the other organisms, they are dependent on other organisms for procuring their food. So that brings us to a very important question, that what are the components of food, right? So whether we are having fruits, roughage, cereals, grains, dairy products, eggs, etc., any kind of food, it essentially has these four main biomolecules. So first of all, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are complex compounds of carbon and hydrogen, and they can be broken down by enzymatic action into the simplest substances like sugar, right, like glucose. And then, of course, they are the building blocks of life, and the most important functional group called the proteins, right? And then, of course, we have the fats or the lipids, and lipids or fats are very essential for dissolving some very important vitamins in our body. And then, of course, nucleic acids. And when I say nucleic acids, as the name indicates, these are negatively charged molecules, hence the word acids, and nucleic because they are found within the nucleus. And of course, we are going to know more about them. So apart from vitamins, minerals, fiber, roughage, water content, food essentially is made up of these four biomolecules. So when we talk of heterotrophic mode of nutrition, we can have two main methods by which the organism is procuring this food from its external environment and from other organisms. The first is the holozoic mode. So holo means whole, if you can remember it like that, and zoikos means animals. This is the Greek root of the word, if you break it down. So these are basically organisms which are internalizing and ingesting complete food particles, right? And then, of course, they are having digestion or breakdown of those food particles within the body, and that is how they are utilizing this food for their energy needs. Depending upon what kind of food they are consuming, well, if they are consuming herbs or green plants and these kind of organisms which are autotrophs essentially, then these are the herbivores. So herbivores are dependent upon autotrophs. They are consuming autotrophs. Then we have the other two kinds of consumers, like the carnivores. Carnivores, as the word indicates, carni from the word carnal. So it would mean that these animals feed on other animals. So they may be parasitic. You can have a number of other kind of relationships when you talk of carnivores. For example, a lion is a predator and it hunts down a deer. The lion is a carnivore, right? And then we have other kind of organisms as well. We have the parasites, for example. I won't say that the parasites are carnivores. Parasitism is another mode of nutrition in which a microbe or a worm kind of is dependent upon a living host cell to get all their nutrition. And these parasites, we must remember, are all disease-causing organisms. Recall this fact from your class 9th when you did a lot of human diseases. So I'm sure you will be able to recognize that. And then we have the omnivores. So omni means all. So these are the organisms which can have a plant-based diet as well as feed on other animals and animal products. For example, on a large scale, human beings can be considered to be a good example of omnivores. Crows can be considered to be a good example of omnivores. Bears too. So you can have a number of examples. And then, of course, we have also discussed in one of the previous classes what is the extracellular mode. So let's be very clear. Extra means outside and cellular means outside the cells. So these are the organisms which do not perform digestion within their body cells. They are releasing the enzymes or the biocatalysts which will break down the food particles in their surroundings, and then these organisms will simply just absorb the simplified food particles into their body. Now, majority of the decomposers are under this category. Fungi, most part of it. So a number of fungi, they release these digestive enzymes upon the substrate or the food on which they are growing. So if you've ever come across a rotten piece of bread or a rotting fruit or vegetable, well, that is the saprophytic mode of the fungi and decomposition happening right in front of you. So the entire process is about digestion happening outside the body, and the organism is just then absorbing the digested food into their body. And when we say digestion, we are talking about the breakdown of the food particles into simple components. So this brings us to the next important part, which is what are the different steps involved in holozoic nutrition, in which the organism is, internalizing and ingesting the whole food particles, and then the entire process of digestion and the other steps are happening within the body. So holozoic nutrition can be divided into 5 main steps. That is, number 1, ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion. Again, split the word. Ingestion means, just look at the word inside. So it means taking in. This is the first step of nutrition, in which the organism is taking the food inside their body. Right? The complex food, the carbon-rich, energy providing food is to be taken inside the body. Now, this happens through an oral cavity or a mouth or an opening, right? So that is ingestion. The second step is, once it is inside the body, this food has to be broken down into simpler components with the help of special biological catalysts or enzymes, so that the body can absorb these simple food substances, right? So the next step is absorption. So when we say absorption, we are talking about these simplified molecules which are created as a result of that digestion getting into the body cells, right? They are being taken up by the body cells. The next step, assimilation. To assimilate something means you're trying to concentrate something, you're trying to utilize something. So once the simpler food substances have been absorbed by the body cells, now it's time for their utilization. It's time for them to participate in other chemical reactions so that they are of help to the body. And last but not the least, there are several components of the food that we consume which we are unable to digest and break down. They will be removed, they'll be thrown out of the body in the form of fecal matter or undigested wastes, and that step is egestion. So you start with ingestion and you end up with egestion. So these 5 steps are the hallmark steps of any organism which is having the holozoic mode of nutrition, which brings us back to the slide where I've introduced you what are the main components of the food. And when we talked of the second step, which is digestion. So when you take in this food through your mouth, right? Next, this step, this food, the various components of the food, they should be broken down. They should be digested by different enzymes. Now that brings us to a very important part, that is, what are enzymes? So enzymes are the biological catalysts. They mediate a chemical reaction. They increase the speed of the reaction. And from complex molecules, you end up getting simpler molecules, which the body can utilize. So the digestion part is very important. We must understand that our body cannot directly utilize starch. But when the starch is broken down to simpler sugars like glucose, glucose is definitely absorbed and assimilated by our body and utilized. So that is to be understood. That is why digestion is important, so that the body can take benefit of the food that we are eating. Now, another beautiful thing about the enzymes is that these enzymes are a type of proteins, right? So they are a kind of proteins and they are very specific. They are very specific. Let me tell you something very simple. For example, all of us use our cell phones and majority of you are using your smartphones and you have a fingerprint mode at the back or you fill in some screen code, right? So if someone puts in that code or someone puts their finger to be scanned, unless and until the cell phone's software does not recognize it to be the correct code, the screen doesn't open and you're not able to use the cell phone. So what have you done? You have made your cell phone specific to yourself. Just like your house keys, they open the lock of your home only, not your neighbors, not anyone else's. There is a specificity. Simply like that, enzymes also are very specific molecules. So there are some special enzymes meant for the breakdown of carbohydrates. Now these enzymes are called amylases and they act upon complex carbohydrates like starch, glycogen, and they bring them down and break them down to simple sugars, which can be absorbed and assimilated by the body. Then proteins are broken down by proteases into peptides and ultimately the simple building blocks called amino acids. Lipids and fats are broken down by lipases to fatty acids and glycerol. And the nucleic acids are broken down into a number of nitrogen-containing compounds by enzymes called nucleases. So what is special over here is that proteases can only mediate the breakdown of proteins. They are specific to the breakdown of proteins. They cannot mediate the digestion of lipids or nucleic acids or carbohydrates. Similarly, you can apply the same principle on the other four classes. Now, why have I introduced these four classes of enzymes to you is because these enzymes and types of these enzymes you are going to encounter in quite a lot of sections of the chapter life processes, especially in digestion. So I just thought it is better if you knew what these enzymes were, what were the unique characteristics of enzymes, that they are specific, that they are proteinaceous in nature, and how they are digesting and helping in the breakdown and reduction of complex food molecules into simpler forms which can be utilized by the body. And of course, that brings us to how does this kind of nutrition happens in human beings. So you must understand one thing. Human beings are very specialized, highly evolved organisms. So their body design is very complex as compared to other organisms. So when we talk of our digestive system, when we talk of the organs which are involved in the holozoic nutrition in our body, we must understand that we have two separate openings to our nutritive process and the organs involved in. Now, one opening is meant for ingestion of food. All the other three steps happen in between, and the separate opening is available for egestion of the undigested wastes or undigested food particles, right? Now, this distinction is prevalent that ingestion and egestion is happening at two different openings of the alimentary canal. This is the feature of a very specialized organism, right? So you must bear this in your mind. Okay, so now after this introduction, it will be very easy for you to go through this section 6.2.2 about heterotrophic nutrition from your NCERT textbook with the right kind of examples for the different kinds of organisms having different modes of nutrition. Under heterotrophic nutrition, of course, you can have a number of herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, parasites, decomposers, and now the terms holozoic nutrition, extracellular, intracellular digestion, all of this should start making more sense to you. So now we come down to how do simple organisms like amoeba, how are they obtaining their food? We have just discussed that human beings, something is very special about the human beings because they are having a very specialized set of organs which are meant to perform those 5 steps of holozoic nutrition. But when we talk of a simple unicellular organism like amoeba, so nutrition happens in some very basic steps. First of all, amoeba is having intracellular digestion. It is internalizing the food particle by throwing its false feet or, of course, pseudopodia. We are all very well aware of that. And of course, that it ingests the finger-like extensions are mentioned. See, temporary finger-like extensions of the cell surface, pseudopodia. So they will engage with pseudopodia will engage with the food particle, help in the internalization. Then, of course, the food particle is now surrounded by a vacuole. Together, this is called the food vacuole. A number of digestive enzymes and secretions will be poured into this food vacuole. The food particle will be broken down into simpler substances, which will be absorbed and taken up for various bodily functions by this cell of amoeba. And if you recall, in the very first lecture, I have already shown you a very quick real-time video of amoeba undergoing nutrition and digestion. So it is very important that you go through these textual lines as well. And now we approach the main topic, which is nutrition in humans. So I've already discussed that the entire digestive tract or passage, it starts with the mouth and it terminates at the anus, right? So the mouth is meant for ingestion of the food. The anus is meant for the egestion of the undigested fecal matter, right? Now, when we say the alimentary canal, so this is the digestive tract, the entire pathway around which holozoic nutrition begins and terminates in human beings. It is essentially a long tube which extends from the mouth to the anus. So as the word indicates, canal means a tube, right? A pathway, a passage. Different regions of the alimentary canal, they are specialized organs and a number of specialized glands which secrete their digestive juices through pipes or ducts are also present alongside, connected to this alimentary canal, and this makes the digestion, the entire process of nutrition, in fact, possible in we human beings. So we must understand that this is the same diagram. So now this diagram I allotted for diagrammatic practice to my students, and it's very interesting to note that within a day I got some more than 70 plus entries from your side on my WhatsApp, and I'm really happy that you all are putting your efforts back home in quarantine. So let's just quickly go through the various parts. So you have the mouth, right? The mouth, the oral cavity, the buccal cavity, which is meant for ingesting the food. Now just go through yourself. What are the various components? What are the various structures present in your mouth? Yeah. You have your teeth, you have a tongue, you have this watery secretion called saliva being poured in. Ever thought where this saliva comes in? Well, regretfully, those salivary glands have not been mentioned here in the diagram. So I took the liberty of adding them. I'll just show you. And then, of course, the mouth or the buccal cavity or the oral cavity then extends into the food pipe or the esophagus, which runs through your chest region. And then the esophagus or the food pipe, it kind of extends into a muscular bag, not muscular much, the bag-like structure. So imagine you're drawing an opposite C, right? So this bag-like structure is the stomach, which will hold the food for further digestion to happen. And you can see that the stomach is then, of course, extending into the small intestine, right? And then the small intestine meets into the large intestine through this bag-like structure, this cushiony bag-like structure called the cecum. Again, it is not marked in the diagram. So I will be sharing a better diagram and more techniques how to draw this diagram of the human alimentary canal with all of you in my coming slides. And of course, a number of associated glands. So you see liver, and with liver you have gallbladder. There were salivary glands in the mouth. Pancreas, very interesting to see how the liver pours its secretions into the gallbladder. The gallbladder stores the secretion of the liver. And of course, then the gallbladder and the pancreas, they release their juices or secretions into this part of this extended, the beginning part of the small intestine. That is called the duodenum. Duodenum. And this is very interesting that you must be able to show very clearly that the secretions of the bile duct that is coming from the gallbladder and the pancreatic duct which is coming from the pancreas, it is merging into the duodenum. It is draining the juices into the duodenum, and these are digestive juices. Now I'm very sure you're familiar with what digestion is. So the first task for you all is, for today, I won't go into the exact intricacies of the human digestive system just today because it would be too much of an information. I just need us to draw a very holistic diagram of the human digestive system. For this, the first step is you have to draw the outline of the human figure, right? So today, just familiarize yourself with the diagram of the digestive system, the alimentary canal, and how you draw it and how do you recognize the different parts, organs, and glands associated. Now, the most important thing while drawing any diagram, especially if it is the diagram of a major organ system, is to remember the proportions. So you know that where your mouth is. So the mouth region has to be shown in the head region. You know that the head, over here I've marked the neck, also the part of the head region. So it has to be a bit shorter than the chest or the thoracic region. The abdomen part, the abdomen region would be longer. So this is just a way, a rough way to scale up, to proportionalize your diagram. Now, for your common information, this esophagus in any adult human is approximately of 25 centimeters in length, right? Esophagus, or the food pipe. But it is very difficult to draw that exact dimension on a paper for your diagram. So it is always better to reduce the scale of the organs, but the proportion should not be disturbed. So many a times we'll have students drawing extra large heads or extra large torsos and very small abdomens. So please ensure that first you get the outline of the human figure correct and proportionate, and the left hand side and the right hand side should be a bit symmetric. And then you start completing the mouth parts. You start drawing the mouth parts, and then of course the esophagus terminating into the stomach and the duodenum. Then you can start marking the pancreas. While you do that, in the thoracic region, in the lower part, just where it is about to terminate, you can just draw an arc to mark the position of the diaphragm. So remember that the diaphragm is not a part of the digestive system, but it is essential to know the position so that you can mark the position of other organs of the digestive system with respect to the diaphragm. So once these steps are complete, you can move down to the further steps. You can, complete the liver. Remember, the liver stop must touch the diaphragm, right? It is one cue, one hint of drawing it correct. And of course, the liver is the largest gland of your body. And how the gallbladder is positioned across it, and how the bile duct, that is the pipe or the duct or the passage of the gallbladder coming from the gallbladder, is draining into this beginning part of the small intestine. Then we have the pancreatic duct draining in here. And of course, the small intestine coils inside and it merges into the large intestine through the cecum. bag-like structure, remember, and then you have the large intestine or the colon, right? And of course, the colon, you can see large intestine. I've drawn, first I gave it a rough form, and then you can just, create these curves around it. Just for clarity, you could do some parts shaded and unshaded. For example, you can shade the entire alimentary canal, and then you can leave the glands unshaded, like the liver. So what is new in this diagram? Very clearly, the 3 types of salivary glands have been marked, number 1. So I'll just ensure that these glands are visible to you. The parotid, the submandible, and the submaxillary. Then what is new? You should be able to know the 3 parts of the small intestine. So it is the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, where the pancreas and the gallbladder are pouring their secretions into. And then of course, other 2 parts of the small intestine, namely jejunum and ileum. Then large intestine is also called the colon, and at which point does the small intestine merge into the large intestine, that is cecum. And this other part of the small intestine, this pointed end, this is the vermiform appendix. Remember, appendix is the vestigial organ, a dominant organ, no longer in use. And of course, then the large intestine or the colon terminates into the rectum and the anus. So it is very important that you know these exact parts of the diagram and you are able to draw them successfully. I've just selected 2 entries from your student entries and have featured them in the video. I just like the way this wonderful student has, used some colored pencils and crayons, and this is a very good way. So the diagram is good with the proportions, it is good with the position of the organs, most of the parts are labeled, and what I like about this diagram is the child has been very systematic. What they have done, they have labeled the glands of the digestive system or the alimentary canal at one side, and they have labeled the parts or the organs of the alimentary canal at one side. So this is very essential. And then this child, what she has done is she has labeled the duodenum, jejunum, ileum and sub-labeled it together as the small intestine. The small intestine has 3 parts to it: duodenum, jejunum, ileum. So this can also be one very good way of presenting your diagram. Another way could be that you use the sketching technique with the pencil. And remember, how have we done our labelings? We must try that majority of the labelings should come towards one side of your diagram. So it's not good to do haphazard labeling. And students, diagrams are drawn in pencils. They are labeled with pencils. So use your stationery well for the same. And what your assignment for today is, look at this. You are supposed to pause the video at this point. Once you have memorized the various parts and organs and glands associated with the alimentary canal, just recall them and try and complete the labelings over here. So that will be it for today's class. We will be continuing nutrition in humans, and I'll be talking more about the entire alimentary canal and its functions in detail, the various glands in detail in the coming class, and that will mark the end of nutrition as a life process. Thank you. See you soon. Stay merry, stay happy, and stay motivated.